Ritsuka was walking down the hallways towards the summoning room, carrying his hard-earned Saint Quartz in his hands. "Alright, let's see what I am going to get today," he thought happily to himself. As he continued to walk down the hallways, it was then he bumped into Merlin. "HM? Oh yeah, hey there master," Merlin said with a smile on his face. "Are those Saint Quartz in your hands?" "Yeah. Right now, I'm about to summon new servants today, do you want to see?" "HM. Okay. I've never seen you summon a servant before, so I want to see how it works." "Great. Let's go then." Soon, Merlin followed Ritsuka to the summoning room. As he did, Ritsuka then placed the Saint Quartz onto the summoning altar. As he did, the altar lit up and in an instant, multiple blue orbs appeared in the air and connected with each other. They then turned into a rite of blue sparks and swirled around with each other, forming a ring that then split into three and continued to swirl around until it turned into a pillar of light. So that's how the summoning works, quite interesting, Merlin said with interest. "Really?" Ritsuka asked. "Yeah. Normally you would have to do a chant along with making a magic circle, but I guess in this case, you don't. That's how magi do it when they summon servants." "I see, well then, I've learned something new today." "You sure did." As the light faded, it revealed a gold card showing a man wearing a hat while carrying a spear, signaling Ritsuka that he summoned a Lancer-class servant. The card soon disappeared and in its place was a man. The man himself has silver hair, was wearing armor along with a shoulder plate, and was carrying a spear. Second seat of the round table, Knight Percival. "I have hereby come to this world. Along with the other Holy Lance, I shall become your power." "Master," Percival said. As he finished his introduction, he noticed Merlin, who was right next to Ritsuka. "Merlin. It's a pleasure seeing you here again." "Yeah. It's a pleasure seeing you here too, Percival," Merlin replied. "Yeah. Are you my master by any chance?" Percival asked. No. It's this gentleman over there," Merlin replied as he pointed at Ritsuka. Percival then turned to Ritsuka. So you are my master then." "What is your name, young lad?" he asked. My name is Fujimaru Ritsuka, but you can call me Ritsuka," Ritsuka replied. "Ritsuka, that's a good name." Percival then raised his hand. "I hope we can get along, master." Ritsuka let out a smile. "Me too. Anyways, welcome to Chaldea," he said as he grabbed Percival's hand and did a handshake with it. As the two were doing their handshake, the summoning altar lit up again. Both Ritsuka and Percival noticed it and stopped shaking hands to see what was going to happen next. As it did, multiple blue orbs appeared in the air and connected with each other. They then turned into a rite of blue sparks and swirled around with each other, forming a ring that then split into three and continued to swirl around until it turned into a pillar of light. Eventually, the light faded, revealing a silver card showing a man wearing a skull while holding two daggers with both hands. However, the card started to cackle as gold sparks moved around the card, turning it into a gold assassin class card. The card then disappeared as a man appeared. The man himself was clad almost entirely in black armor along with a dark blue fur-lined cloak draped over his left side. He has slicked back black hair and pale skin. "Servant assassin, Agravain. Do your best to make good use of me," Agravain said. "Why yeah. Welcome to Chaldea, Agravain," Ritsuka said. Agravain then got off the summoning altar. As he did, he noticed Percival and Tristan in the room. "Sir Percival, Merlin," he said. Sir Agravain. I see that you are here as well." Percival said. "Oh? Looks like you are here too, Agravain," Merlin said. "Seems so. Anyways, what is Chaldea master?" Agravain asked. Oh yeah, I want to know as well. Percival asked. An organization designed to protect humanity. What we do is we find singularities in the timeline and try to fix the problem by eliminating the source of the singularity. How we do it is that we summon heroic spirits from the throne of heroes and ask them to support us. I see, that sounds intriguing. An organization designed to protect humanity. I've never heard of an organization such like that in my lifetime. Percival said with interest. Yeah. Speaking of which, do you two want to go on a tour of Chaldea? Ritsuka asked. Percival let out a smile. Sure. This place looks like nothing I have ever seen before. Come on Agravain, let's look, shall we? Agravain let out a sigh while groaning at the same time. Percival, this is not a field trip. We're not here to have fun. Especially after what Master has told us earlier. It was then Merlin placed a hand on Agravain's shoulder. Oh, lighten up Agravain. Quit being such a grumpy cat. We're not in trouble now. In fact, despite how Chaldea sounds, the work here is not that stressful, he said with a smile on his face. Agravain sighed. Really Merlin? He growled with annoyance. It was then Ritsuka decided to intervene. Now, let's not start a fight. You two just arrived here, so let's not start a fight here, okay? For a moment, nobody said anything until Agravain opened his mouth. Well, if I'm going to be working here, from now on, I might as well get a loadout of the map of this place, so I can know where to go. Merlin let out a smile. That's the spirit, Agravain. Now then, let's get a move on. Percival let out a sigh. Even now, Merlin has not changed in any way. In a good way or a bad way? Ritsuka asked. Both. And over there is the training room, where servants can spend their time over there honing their skills by practice matches or testing their skills on training dummies. Percival's eyes brightened upon looking at the training room. Oh, so this is the training room, huh? It looks a lot different from what I've seen before. He said with amazement in his eyes. So, this is the future. Agravain let out a sigh. Let's move on, Master, before he get interested in testing out his weapon in there immediately. Ritsuka nodded. Percival, let's move on. Once we're done, you're free to come over there. Okay. Soon, Ritsuka and Merlin continued to give Percival and Agravain the tour of Chaldea. However, as they continued to walk, it was then they came across a certain group of servants. The Knights of the Round. Upon seeing each other, both sides were shocked, or rather both sides and only Percival, because Agravain looks too grumpy to be shocked. Percival? Agravain, the Knights of the Round said in unison. Gawain? Lancelot? Tristan? Gareth? Mordred? Bedivere? Percival yelled with a smile on his face. To think we would meet each other again like this is amazing. Well, thanks to Master over there, it was possible, Gawain said, making Ritsuka blush for a bit. I can see that, although it feels like some of you have changed since the last time I saw all of you. Especially you, Bedivere. Eh? Really? Bedivere asked. Yeah. It is as if the dark thorns you were always burdened with had disappeared. Now I only see flowers of faint colors. These are violet. What kind of flowers are they? Bedivere was quite confused with Percival's words, but still accepted them. Anyways, I'm glad to see you two again, he said. Me too, Gareth said. Me 3, Lancelot said. Me 4, Tristan said. Mordred was silent for a moment before Gawain nudged Mordred. Come on Mordred, say something. Mordred grumbled for a moment before continuing. It's nice to see both of you again. She grumbled. Both Percival and Agravain were a little shocked upon hearing Mordred's greeting, while Merlin let out a chuckle. Did Mordred just greet you two like that? Impossible. At that moment, Mordred lost her temper. Huh? What was that, Merlin, you bastard? I'll end you, she yelled in anger. Percival let out a smile before he realized something. Wait, if all of you are here, then does that mean that our King of Knights are here too? Agravain's eyes shot up. Really? Yeah. And let's just say, you're in for a huge surprise, Merlin said with a smirk on his face. No kidding. Especially if they found out her counterparts. The Knights of the Round thought in unison. It was then Percival nudged Agravain. Now then, Agravain, don't you have to introduce yourself to them as well? Why? We already know each other, so what's the point? Agravain said. Oh, come on. Quit being so hard-headed and introduce yourself to them, Merlin said with a smile. Agravain let out a grumble before turning to Percival, who stared at him. Then he turned to the Knights of the Round, who were doing the same. None of you are going to stop giving me that stare until I introduce myself? Yup, everyone said in unison. Agravain sighed again. Well, looks like I have no choice then, he said before he cleared his throat. Well, it's nice to see all of you here again, I guess. Gawain let out a smile. Nice to see you too, Agravain. Yeah. Even though you may be a grumpy pants, we're all glad to see you here, Gareth said. Indeed. Now we can serve the king again, like how we used to, Tristan said. Exactly, Bedivere said. Now then, now that we got our greetings done, shall we move on, master? Merlin asked. Oh yeah. Sorry for breaking you two up, but I need to take these two on a tour to Chaldea, Ritsuka apologized. That's okay, master. We'll meet up again soon when you're done, Bedivere said. Anyways, see you, Percival. You too, Agravain, Gareth said. Yeah. And I'll make sure to feed all of you again, like before, Percival replied. Soon, both groups left in their own direction. As the Knights of the Round left, it was then Gawain remembered that they forgot to mention someone to Percival and Agravain. Ah. We forgot something, Gawain said. HM? What? Lancelot asked. We forgot to mention Queen Shirou. Meanwhile, with Ritsuka, Merlin, Percival, and Agravain, they continued to walk down the hallway with both Ritsuka and Merlin showing Percival and Agravain the inner workings of Chaldea. While Percival was amazed with the workings of Chaldea, Agravain still had his signature grumpy look on his face. Well then, looks like no matter wherever I go, the others will follow. Man, talk about a twist of fate, speaking of which, I wonder if she's here, Agravain thought as he was looking at another room. However, as the group were on their tour, it was then they came across a certain servant that shocked Agravain to the core. Morgan, and she had her knights with her as well. Upon seeing Morgan, Agravain felt his blood boil upon seeing her face and was about to draw his sword and attack her, but stopped himself before he could do so. What the hell? Why is she doing here? Is she planning on doing something evil here again? HM? Who is that lady over there? And those people as well, Percival thought. Oh, looks like Morgan's meeting Agravain this early, Merlin thought. My husband, who are these people over there? And I see you brought that damn wizard over there as well, Morgan asked. At that moment, Agravain was even more shocked than before. Husband? Master? Ah. These two over there are Percival and Agravain, who are members of the Knights of the Round, Ritsuka replied. Ah, I see. She then began to introduce herself to Tristan and Agravain. My name is Morgan Le Fay, the Queen of the Fey Nation Britain, and the one who continues cursing pan-human history. Along with me are my fairy knights of the round. My name is Fairy Knight Gawain. My name is Fairy Knight Tristan. My name is Fairy Knight Lancelot. That got Agravain confused. Fey Nation Britain? Cursing pan-human history? What is she talking about? Also, Fairy Knights of the Round? Fairy Knights of the Round? I've never heard of them. And why did they take up my fellow knights' names? Percival thought. Aren't you two going to introduce yourselves to them? My name is Percival, and the person that is next to me is Agravain, Percival said as he greeted himself to her. My name is Agravain. Agravain said. I see. By the way, my husband, you have training to do later in the afternoon. Remember that. Ritsuka shuddered slightly but answered her question. Yeah. Morgan let out a smile. Good, she said before she noticed that Agravain was staring at her with his signature glare. You seem to be looking at me for quite a while. Is there a problem? Agravain was silent before continuing the conversation. Do you know who I am? Yeah. You're Agravain, one of the Knights of the Round in the pan-human history. That's not what I meant. Do you know who I really am? Morgan was confused for a moment and did not say anything, making Agravain confess. I'm your son from the pan-human history. Percival and the Fairy Knights were shocked while Morgan raised an eyebrow upon hearing the news. Is that true? They asked in unison. Yeah. Agravain said. For a moment, Morgan did not say anything as she examined Agravain, making him slightly shudder from her gazes. After a while, she was done. I see. So, you are my son from pan-human history. So what? She then placed a hand on his shoulder. It seems that my counterpart raised such a knight. Agravain was stunned. Eh? Good luck here, this place is quite eventful, she said as she soon left. For a moment, nobody said anything while Agravain was trying to process the words she just received. Did she just praise me? Oh my. That was new. Seeing Morgan / Her Highness praising someone like that. Merlin and the Fairy Knights thought. Agravain, are you okay? Ritsuka asked, snapping him out of his thoughts. HM? Oh, yeah. Just thinking about something. I see. Anyways, let's move on then. So, that person was your mother? Percival asked. Agravain let out a sigh. In a way, she is. And yet, she isn't. And right now, I do not want to talk about her, ever, he said while staring at everyone with his glare. Fine. Although the Fairy Knights were confusing me for a bit. Percival said. While Merlin and Percival were used to the glare, Ritsuka was not. In fact, he was feeling that Agravain's stare was staring into his soul, creeping him out. Whoa. That stare, scary, he thought with a giant gulp. Soon, the tour continued, where Ritsuka easily forgot his earlier fear from Agravain's stare, Percival amazed, and Merlin, well, being Merlin and just looking at things. Eventually, the tour was ending. Well then, our final stop of the tour is the cafeteria, Ritsuka said. The cafeteria, huh? Brings back so many memories. Percival said. Really? Yeah. Back when I was a member of the Knights of the Round, I oversaw making the meals aside from Gawain, he said with fond memories coming into his head. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. Believe it or not, I'm quite confident in my cooking skills. Both in taste and quantity. My king can be quite a big eater. Ritsuka let out a chuckle. You can say that again. Soon, the group were getting closer to the cafeteria, and when they did, they saw something that they would never expect to see. Arturia, who was wearing a smile on her face while eating food made by Shirou. Shirou. Seconds. Yes. Shirou replied as he gave Arturia another serving of curry rice. Arturia greedily took the plate of curry rice and ate with speed. As she was done with her meal, she let out a satisfied sigh. Ah, Shirou, I can't get enough of your cooking. It's so good. Shirou let out a smile. I'm glad that you liked it, Arturia. Meanwhile, both Percival and Agravain looked at the scene with shock and surprise on their faces. After all, they have never seen their king with a smile on her face before, so this was a completely new thing to them. Hey Percival, are you seeing what I am seeing? Agravain asked. Yes, our king has a smile on her face, while eating at the same time. Percival replied. And who is that person behind the counter? And how does he know her? For a moment, nothing happened as they looked at the scene with interest in their eyes. Well, are you two going to greet her? Ritsuka asked. Both looked at Ritsuka and nodded in agreement. Soon, both Percival and Agravain went into the cafeteria. My king, Percival said. Arturia's ears perked up upon hearing Percival's voice. This voice, can it be? She thought as she stopped eating for a moment before turning around. As she did, she saw the faces of Percival and Agravain along with Ritsuka and Merlin following them. Percival? Agravain? Is that the both of you? Percival let out a smile as he kneeled. Yes. To think we could meet you again. Moreover, to be fellow servants serving the same Lord. What a strange coincidence. Indeed, along with the rest of the knights of the round, Agravain said before he kneeled as well. We meet again, my king. Arturia let out a smile. Raise your hands, both of you. Both raised their heads, while Arturia turned to Ritsuka. Master, did you summon them? Yeah. Just today actually, Ritsuka replied. I see. Anyways, I'm glad to see you two again, Arturia said. Yeah, speaking of which, who are you, and how do you know our king? Percival asked as he along with Agravain turned to Shirou. Ah, Percival, Agravain, meet Emiya Shirou, my scabbard, my former master, and my consort, Arturia said. Pleased to meet you Percival, Agravain, Shirou said. At that moment, both Percival and Agravain dropped their mouths. Scabbard? Former master? Consort? Agravain said. Yes, Arturia calmly stated. For a moment, nobody said anything as both Percival and Agravain were trying to process the information they just received. After a few seconds, Percival began to speak. I have so many questions right now, especially about your relationship with Emiya Shirou and how he earned all of those titles, he said. So do I, Agravain said. Arturia let out a sigh. Very well, Shirou was my former master in a Holy Grail war he was in. During that time, I discovered that he was carrying Avalon inside of him the entire time along with, well, falling in love with him. She said with a blush at the last part. At that moment, both Percival and Agravain were stunned, especially at the part where she said she fell in love with Shirou. However, both Percival and Agravain quickly recovered. Eh? So our king fell in love in you, that's interesting. Percival said as he eyed Shirou carefully. Thank you. Shirou said, not knowing what to say. However, Agravain had a different question. And what makes you worthy of our king's adoration, Emiya Shirou? He asked, menacingly. Arturia got defensive for a moment. Hey! I'll have you know is that Shirou can project many weapons and can use them, became a pseudo-servant vessel to a heroic spirit known as Sengo Muramasa, who happens to be the demonic blacksmith, and his ancestor fought off many heroic spirits including the king of heroes, corrupt magi, rogue dead apostle ancestors, and even an evil immortal interdimensional space god that can control the Akashic records from another dimension. And it was all for finding me again. Plus, he's a good cook, she said proudly. Percival's and Agravain's mouths dropped again. For a moment, nobody said anything until Percival broke the silence. Wow, that's a lot to take in, and it's amazing, he said with amazement. And you said he's a good cook? Yeah. No offense, but Shirou could beat you in cooking, Arturia said. That got Percival interested. Really? I like to see him try that. He then grabbed onto Agravain. Come on, Agravain. We're going to check to see if he's good for our king. Soon, both Percival dragged Agravain onto the table booths. As he did, Agravain let out a sigh. Is this really necessary? Hey! You were the one who wanted to see if he was worthy of our king's affection, Percival argued. Anyways, can we have the same thing as what our king was having earlier? He asked Shirou. Shirou was confused, but still went with Percival's request. After all, he was just asking for the same meal Arturia was having earlier. Okay, give me a moment, he said before he went back into the kitchen. Meanwhile, Arturia sat on a nearby booth next to Percival and Agravain while Ritsuka and Merlin watched. So, my king, has Emiya Shirou been giving you a hard time? Agravain asked. No. Rather, life with him is quite enjoyable, Arturia replied with a smile on her face. Really? How so? Percival asked, interested in the person who made his king talk like a normal person. Well, let's just say, he's the person I cherish the most, she said. At that moment, Percival and Agravain were surprised with her words. Wow! Is this really our king? To think our king was able to speak like this, and that smile on her, it suits her, Percival thought. Both Percival and Agravain turned to Merlin and Ritsuka. Master, Merlin, is what our king saying about Emiya Shirou is true? Agravain asked. Merlin replied with a smile. Yes. And in case if you're wondering, the other knights of the round adore him, especially Mordred. Really? Percival asked. Yeah. In fact, do you want to know what they call him? What? Merlin let out a snicker. Queen Shirou. Agravain's eyes widened, and Percival almost laughed upon hearing Merlin's answer. You're kidding me. Him? Our new queen? Agravain said in disbelief. Well, she did say consort earlier, although that's quite the surprise I've ever heard, Percival said. Yeah. And guess what? Mordred calls him mother, Merlin continued. It was at that moment that Agravain nearly face-planted onto the countertop but managed to control himself. What the hell is this, Mordred calling him mother? He muttered. Meanwhile, Percival was slightly snickering. Queen Shirou, and Mordred calling him mother. It was then that Shirou brought out 3 plates of the same dish from earlier. Here you go, he said as he handed them their plates of curry rice. Both Percival and Agravain snapped out of their reactions and looked at their plates, with Percival looking at it with awe. It doesn't look bad. Let's see how it tastes. He thought as he grabbed a spoonful of curry rice all together and took a bite out of it. The moment he did, his mouth felt like it was on an adventure. This is delicious. It's nothing that I have ever tasted before. Soon, he began to take another spoonful and started to clear his plate with ease. Eventually, he was done with his plate of curry rice. Wow. As much as I don't want to admit it, that was the best meal I've ever eaten in my life, he exclaimed happily. Shirou let out a smile. I'm glad that you are satisfied, Percival. Percival nodded. And how about you, Agravain? Agravain didn't say anything but brought out his spoon and took a spoonful of curry rice, taking the thing into his mouth. After a few seconds of him chewing and swallowing, he put down his spoon. It's not bad, at least. I can see why our king adores you, Emiya Shirou, he said as he relaxed his face for a bit. Shirou let out a sigh of relief as he knew he did not anger Agravain and Percival. However, I'll keep an eye on you, Emiya Shirou. If you have managed to do something harmful to my king, I'll end you. Got it? He said menacingly. Yeah. Good. Percival let out a sigh. Well, at least the tension is over. Anyways, this is good. What is this dish called? He asked with interest. Curry rice, Shirou replied. Curry rice? Is it a fancy dish? No. It's a dish people can eat any day as long as they have the ingredients. It's also easy to make as well. Really? That's interesting, he said as he turned to Arturia. As he did, he along with Agravain saw something rare in his lifetime. Which was Arturia was smiling as she was eating her third plate of rice. Percival let out a smile. Wow. Our king really has changed. Yeah. It was then Percival turned to Shirou. Thank you, Queen Shirou. Shirou nearly let out a spit take while Agravain was shocked at Percival's words. Percival, they said in unison while Ritsuka sighed, and Merlin chuckled. What? If this person is our king's new consort, then we need to give him the proper respect, Percival replied. Him? But he's a man. Agravain argued. Shirou let out a sigh. Looks like these two are going to be at it for a while, and another knight of the round calls me by that name now. Oh boy, something tells me we're going to see something happen soon, Ritsuka thought. As the two were arguing against each other, it was then they heard a horde of footsteps coming in. And Shirou immediately knew what those footsteps were, along with the voices that came next. Shirou. Food. Both Percival and Agravain jumped upon hearing the familiar voices from the cafeteria and turned around to see what the voices were. As they did, their jaws dropped at the sight in front of them, which was Arturia's counterparts. Percival and Agravain were stunned for a moment. My king, are they? Percival asked. HM? Ah, yeah. Those are my counterparts, Arturia replied while still eating her curry rice. For a moment, nothing happened, until Agravain fell onto the floor in shock. Agravain? Shirou, Arturia, Percival, and Ritsuka yelled in unison. Oh my, Merlin said. So many versions of my king, he thought before he passed out. Oh make. HM? Is that true? Morgan asked. Yeah. From what I heard, one of your sister's counterparts apparently had sex with Emiya Shirou, Fairy Knight Gawain replied. And from what we heard the sex was so pleasurable that Master ran away from embarrassment. Ha! Fairy Knight Tristan said. And the counterpart that seems to have sex with him was her ruler counterpart. You know, the one with that body of hers and the bunny suit. Fairy Knight Lancelot said. I see, and who was the one that spread the rumor? The Fairy Knights didn't say anything, prompting Morgan to ask again. Well? Fairy Knight Gawain let out a sigh. Merlin. Morgan let out a groan as she facepalmed herself. Don't listen to anything that wizard says. And I'll make deals with last chapter.